Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Star Wars is apparently making a comeback, or well, something like that anyway, Steve, if you happen to, check the latest announcements from the Star Wars celebration that happened a couple of days ago. I'm very skeptical about how any of this will come along. Now, I'm going to caveat this by saying that since Disney took over Star Wars, there have been one or two actual, good products that have come out, in terms of TV shows, and or being probably the best thing that they've made. But by and large, it's quite clear to me since Disney took over Star Wars that there haven't been people who have planned things out. So the sequel trilogy is a classic example of no one took the horse by the reins kind of thing and kind of drove it through with a coherent story across the three films. The TV shows have been hit and miss. The Mandalorian's been really great for its first two seasons. I've been watching the third season, and I've been struggling to understand what they're trying to say in this third season. It's kind of going all over the place, apart from, the fan service type stuff where, that's cool or that's cool. Like, for instance, I believe the internet had a meltdown in the episode recently where Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace, he came out and he was playing a heroic Jedi character that did really well, and it was kind of like a reward for all the crap he's been dealing with for 20 years, having brought that character to life. But having said all of that, they made this announcement and they kind of had this plan of all these Star Wars eras that they're going to start, planning all these movies and TV shows in. And it seemed like more of a plan. I'm still skeptical whether or not it's actually going to work. They announced three films. Three of the, each film is going to be set in a different era, so they don't really have much to do with each other. My question was that if they were going to make this kind of announcement, why didn't they make this announcement when they bought it off Lucas back in 2012? That, they could have come out a year later saying, all right, we've got this multi-year decade plan and this is what it's going to look like. They didn't do that. So now, given that there's now 10, 11 years have passed since then, and now they're saying there's a plan, it doesn't really bode well for the Star Wars future, particularly as two of the films are based on existing storylines that were created post-Lucas. So there's a sequel to Episode 9 coming out, and there's a sequel to roughly all the TV shows that are on at the moment. The most interesting one is this one that's set 25,000 years before the original Star Wars, which arguably they could do whatever they wanted there and get away with it. So I don't know, Steve, I know you're not necessarily the biggest Star Wars fan. I'm not actually one either. I'm probably more somewhere in the casual to interested one, like Star Trek's more my thing. But I do care that Star Wars is done properly, but there's nothing about this. It's all about the corporation trying to, get as much out there as possible and making money, and not really understanding, that the reason why Star Wars worked originally is because it was one guy running the whole thing and he put it out there. Is it too much for them to do that? I don't know.
Look, from my perspective, this is simply Star Wars where the Federation won against the Rebels and took over. Finally the Death Star worked and they bought out Lucas, and do you need to have a plan? No, we've got all the rights and then we'll work out a plan later. And I think this is a clear case. So for me, it's been interesting to watch and see what's happened with the franchise. And I think, as you've just covered, there was a logical progression with the films that they did make, but they probably didn't think that much further ahead other than they could spin out TV series or streaming series, and that they'd remake Star Wars 3 times over the next 6 years or something. And now they're having to think about what they're going to do next. And of course, I guess the thing here now is you've traded you've traded someone's vision for a franchise system, and there'll be all sorts of different departments within Disney scrambling to get the rights for their streaming service or their theatrical release. And of course, then there'll be other people who'll be wanting to do spin outs because they've got the rights. So it must be very difficult to manage. And there has been a lot of change, or not so much change, or turmoil at the top of Disney. So you just wonder if all of that plays into this, and how it will affect Star Wars long term. Because there's always the risk, that if you don't really stay on message, you can kill the goose that laid the golden egg.
And I think it's the old adage, great content really comes from great risk. And I think they haven't really learnt how to handle that in a post-Lucas era. Because Lucas, for whatever you want to say about him, criticize him, whatever, he did jump off the cliff with it, but he kind of landed it. So, at least in the beginning, anyway. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. So, and that's kind of what's needed right now from them.
Well, that's right, but I mean, you got to take it back to its roots as a screenplay. Lucas had a vision. He had a story to tell. It's very different, and this is not any particular slight on Disney. It could be any franchise system. You've already got a universe and a group of characters and a backstory in there. What are you going to do that's new? It takes somebody, as you say, very brave once again to come in with a very specific vision, who's probably very much a fan of the original Star Wars, to strike the right essence. Otherwise, you're just making more content. It might be badged Star Wars, but you're just making more content. And I think that's a real risk, particularly when you inherit something as big and as amazing as the Star Wars, story.
All right. Well, we'll watch this space, and at least we can subscribe and watch them all come out as they come along. All right. Our wanted to talk a little bit about iPhone upgrade cycles, and we've sort of touched on this a little bit in the past. But one thing I did want to, there's plenty of articles that would seem to suggest that every maybe roughly 2 to 3 years is probably the rough cadence for upgrading your iPhone, and largely that's because things like the battery might be getting a bit worse for wear by that time. The software updates are slowing down the phone, whatever it happens to be. I've been able to successfully get about 6 years of use out of each iPhone that I've ever had, which that's my my cadence. But then I kind of set an expectation of how much functionality I'll get out of it after year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, that sort of thing. But one thing I did want to sort of just mention quickly is, so I've, it's been 13 years now since I've gotten the iPhone 4, which was the first iPhone I had. I was on a 2-year cadence, which was, so I went from the 4 to the 5 to the 6 to the 7 to the XS Max, 12 Pro Max, and now 14 Pro Max. Now, from the 4 to the XS Max, I would argue that the 2-year cadence actually worked really well, because during the 2010s, there were significant jumps in functionality and just how well the phone worked between the 2-year time frame. But I noticed now with the 14 Pro Max, going from the XS Max to the 14 Pro Max, which would have been a 4-year jump, that 4-year jump is roughly equivalent in terms of my feeling of using the phones as to what the old 2-year jump used to be, which would suggest that these phones are starting to hit a I don't know if you'd call it a limit, but it's slowing down how much they can jam in there, how much they can improve, and all that sort of thing. It's all sort of becoming a lot more slower in terms of that sort of thing. And I would argue now that it'd be perfectly fine to hang out for 4 years, assuming nothing else goes wrong with the phone. But it's interesting that you have to reevaluate these things, because people obviously ask these questions: how long should I keep my device for, or whatever. It's entirely up to you. It's a personal choice. You can buy a new one if you want it. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. But then there are other people that, want to run their existing phone into the ground before, buying another one. So, but I thought it was just the pace of how things have slowed down, which, as a product category matures, you'd expect that.
Oh, you're depressing me, Ben. because I've got an iPhone 13. I don't like it, and I'd gladly trade up after 2 years if I thought the next iPhone was going to be better. I went from an iPhone 4S to an iPhone 13, and just a couple of interesting points. They're about the same shape. They've probably got about the same battery life for the usage that I do. The only difference is that the iPhone 13 is bigger, it's clunkier, and it's less pleasant to use than my iPhone 4S. So I got 4 years out of my iPhone 4S, and I agree with you. I think probably 4 years is optimal for any phone. Sure, you can keep them way longer, and I've got friends who keep iPhones for 6 years, 8 years, and I think that that's great value. In the iPhone, if you're really talking about value, it is great value because you're getting a very good phone, and its longevity is so much better than the two Android phones I had in the years I wasn't with iPhone. So, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think people don't appreciate how good the iPhone is functionally. So whether or not you like it as a device, or you think that Apple has got it right, you're getting an excellent camera, you're getting a reliable operating system that doesn't basically strip all your data and send it off to anyone who might be just curious via your app library as to what you're doing and who you are. So there are a lot of advantages to it, and it's interesting you say that. I could imagine. I mean, if the iPhone is at 15 this year, if it's notably lighter, and no, I don't really care about better. I just want it to be lighter, and I want the operating system to be better, which isn't the function of the hardware. So I'd probably almost go for an iPhone 15 or 16, which would put me at the 2 to 3 year mark. But I have no doubt at all that my iPhone 13 would be reliable and just as good as whatever else Apple is putting out for another 2 years after this, which would make it 4 years.
Well, the 15's rumoured to be getting a titanium casing, which would maybe solve your lightness problem or heaviness problem.
Ben, it needs... my phone feels like a house brick in my pocket, and I haven't got used to it in 2 years. So that's telling you, compared to my Android phone, oh my God.
Absolutely. On my front, on my side, I would say that I'm actually going to maybe spin it out. Like I've never gone beyond 2 years as the primary phone. I'm going to, with the 14 Pro that I've got, I'm going to push it out to 3 years and maybe more depending on how it goes, because I just think that's kind of where we're at the moment. And it's good. It's a good thing. Things have gotten better and whatnot, aside from the aesthetics, I guess.
Oh, well, that's right. And look, the reality is that, with an iPhone, the potential for longevity, I think, is a lot greater than the Android phones that I've experienced. And that was both a Sony and an LG. And I hear the Samsungs aren't much better than a 2 year proposition, and neither are the Pixels, from all the people I know that do own them. So I think the one thing we can say with certainty, love them or hate them, iPhones have longevity built in. And, if you don't have a huge budget, well, it's probably worth spending that big initial hit to get one, and know that you get at least 4 years out of it, maybe longer.
And that's something I've been arguing for years as well. Alrighty. Okay, last topic. I'm just throwing this one in because I find it hilarious. I guess because we, we were into filmmaking a while back, and just knowing some of the shenanigans that go on behind the scenes in terms of egos and deals and dodgy stuff and whatever else that goes on in filmmaking. But it seems like this kind of thing is kind of morphed over into the YouTube content creator community, in the sense that there's the John Campea show, which I've been watching recently because it's got some movie news and stuff like that. And, it seemed like a well-structured show and all that sort of thing. And then I sort of stumbled across all this behind-the-scenes stuff where, he was saying he couldn't afford to pay, a couple of his guest hosts that he usually has on anymore. And then, he was supporting them, or one of them, to go off to develop their own channel, and they're all on each other's, supporting each other and whatever. And it just seemed like a very odd thing to do. And then there's this whole thing about him, spending lots of money on a studio, but then he loses like the talent that actually makes the show really sing. And there's a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff there that is obviously not being said. And on top of that, why I'm relating it to the film and TV industry type stuff is that there's all this PR spin that's on the top of it to say everyone's great, everyone's getting along. This is what we intended from the beginning. It's all, all great and all that sort of thing. And I just found it hilarious, really, just watching it, that you would think that in a community where it's supposed to be a new platform, new way of doing things, all that sort of stuff, and you get this, which is very old school, very 70s, 80s Hollywood type stuff, and yeah, it's just, I just found it funny that it's almost like the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Oh, absolutely. And I love this as well. I got quite into it watching it because it's a story about nothing. So it's almost like Seinfeld arguments where they're talking about transparency and thanking people for standing by them without actually saying what anyone did, why it happened, or what they're doing about it. They're just, sort of, it was all nothing. And the other thing that made me think of was that, like it's a real old school, any news is good news opportunity. So got some bad news going around, so we'll pump it up and we'll try to explain it without telling anyone anything, and I'll fill out a couple of hours of content with this, and people will be coming up with their own conspiracy theories, and it's going to be great. And let me tell you, it was. It was good old school, good old fashioned talent, basically having a bust up, not telling us why, but, telling us everything's okay and that we should enjoy their content.
Absolutely. And I guess I just wanted, as a final point I wanted to make on this was that, we started podcasting back in 2011. And if you compare what YouTube was back then and how the content creators used to do things back then, there was something more of a not naivete, but like an innocence to it. Yeah, we're all getting out there and we're all putting stuff online and it's all great and people can see us and all that. And now it's almost like this, I guess, to go back to the whole Disney thing, a corporatization of content on a platform that's supposed to be just for anyone to do their thing on. And when you then we've talked about the algorithm before, you feed the algorithm in and then it's all feeding that content, and then you end up in a place where the platform's just not doing what it was originally designed for, even though people still do that, but the people who get watched the most are the ones doing the old school kind of stuff, which is just funny, I think.
Oh yeah. Look, it's big money now. It's big money, and the thing is if it's big money attracts a lot of people all trying to take a cut, agents, lawyers, deals, syndication, look, I love it. I love it that I'm no longer in the media and entertainment industry, but I love watching this stuff and I love it. I think it's good for business, good on them. I don't know. I don't know that we need to say anything more than that, but you're right. It's very much all about human nature at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to maybe check out another Star Wars episode here, Steve, to see if I can really get myself excited about those announcements we said at the top of the episode, but I don't know. I just don't think I can get there.
Well, just as a little bit extra as well, I went to see Super Mario's yesterday. And my advice would be don't bother.
And I was a fan. I was even hoping just with the music and the sound effects it would work.
Oh, I'll tell you about it after.
Yeah, it sounds like another episode in the making. All right, so don't forget to check out our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. Alright, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.